3 decades of tending soil, probably 1,000 missteps along the way, but 8 of them were the decisions I truly regret. 3 of those choices cost me more than $1,000 just to undo. One of them quietly fractured a friendship with a neighbor I had known for 15 years. And the 8th plant on this list, the most breathtaking flower of them all, came dangerously close to seriously injuring someone I love. That one still finds me wide awake in the middle of the night. 8 flowers I chose, planted with hope, and now wish I had never brought through my garden gate. The kind of plant that garden catalogs describe as low maintenance, the one your neighbor swore by and convinced you to buy 6 of. Every single one of them seemed like the perfect answer to a problem I already had. 3 years down the road, they had each become the problem themselves. If you are mapping out your spring planting right now, pause everything. Watch this first. The time you give to this will spare you years of backbreaking work you never agreed to take on. Before we get to plant number 1, leave a comment right now. Have you ever brought home something gorgeous that turned into an absolute nightmare by year 3? Tell me yes or no, name the plant, and let me know what state you garden in. I read every single one. Number 1 is the regret you will never see coming. The most striking plant on this entire list, so stay close, because your garden is worth more than guesswork. Plant number 1, the Shasta daisy. Wide, white petals, warm yellow centers, the kind of flower that fills every cottage garden photograph you have ever admired. Wholesome, timeless, completely disarming. What could possibly go sideways? Year 1. Everything was perfect. It bloomed beautifully through early summer. It looked straight out of a gardening magazine. By year 2, I was noticing more Shasta daisies than I remembered putting in the ground. A few extra here and there. Curious. By year 4, they had pushed into the gravel path, smothered perennials I had invested real money in, and were sprouting in the middle of plants they had absolutely no right to be near. I was spending entire weekend mornings doing nothing but deadheading just to slow down the advance. Here is what nobody mentions at the point of sale. After a Shasta daisy finishes blooming, it releases hundreds of seeds. Those seeds ride the wind and settle into everything: soil, gravel, cracks in pavement. And while the seeds move above ground, the roots push outward below, forming larger clumps with every passing season. The real trap is not the plant itself. It is the innocence it wears. You feel almost ridiculous being frustrated with something that looks so cheerful and bright. But by year 4, I was running a Shasta daisy removal operation I had never agreed to manage. Reliable across zones 5 through 9, which covers most of the continental United States. What I grow in its place now is Coreopsis moonbeam. That same warm daisy energy, soft yellow blooms that carry on for months. Tidy growth that stays exactly where you put it. Not once have I had to pull it from somewhere I never planted it. Plant number 2, the orange daylily. You already know this one even if you have never grown it yourself. You have seen it your whole life along highway ditches in Ohio, old fence lines in Tennessee, the edges of abandoned farmhouses in Pennsylvania. Dense clusters of bright orange trumpet flowers completely indifferent to heat, drought, or neglect. That kind of resilience sounds like a selling point until it is living inside your garden. I put a handful along the edge of my property because I wanted that effortless, naturalized cottage look. I got it. The effort arrived later. Within 4 years, what had started as a few modest plants had become a solid mass nearly 3 feet across. It had swallowed the space I had set aside for other things. The tuberous roots beneath the surface were thick, dense, and hopelessly tangled. Getting them out required a mattock, not a trowel. A mattock, a full day of digging, and 3 days of arms that ached with every movement. Here is what the label leaves out. Any fragment of root you miss will regrow. You can bury the bed under mulch, and they push right through. You can cut them to the ground in August, and they return in May, completely unbothered. Professional removal of a well-established orange daylily bed runs anywhere from $300 to $800. That is the true price of a plant that sits on a garden center shelf for $4. If you have never calculated a purchase that way before, this channel is exactly where you need to be. That is the kind of honest math I bring you every single week. The accounting the garden center never does for you. Most aggressive in zones 5 through 8, though, it survives across zones 3 through 9. And you are not even getting the best-looking daylily in the bargain. Modern hybrids come in dozens of colors, bloom more than once, and stay put. What I grow instead, Stella de Oro, or Happy Returns. The same toughness, the repeat blooming, compact and refined. Same growing zones, zero excavation required. Plant number 3, ribbon grass. This is the one that cost me a neighbor. Ribbon grass, the variegated variety with its white and green striping, is genuinely striking. It moves in a breeze in a way that looks deliberate and almost architectural. The tag described it as ideal for filling in those difficult spots where nothing else will grow. I planted it along my back fence line, thinking I had finally solved my most stubborn landscaping challenge. For exactly 1 season, it looked magnificent, lush, full, swaying gracefully in every bit of wind. Then year 2 arrived. New shoots began appearing several feet beyond the bed edge. Interesting, I told myself, but manageable. Year 3, I was pulling ribbon grass out of my vegetable garden 20 feet from where I had originally put it in. It was emerging through the cracks in my patio. It had traveled under the fence, and my neighbor, a man who keeps one of the most immaculate yards I have ever seen, asked me very politely whether I was aware of the grass situation.
That was the conversation I referenced at the start. Not an easy one. Ribbon grass moves through underground rhizomes. Those rhizomes do not acknowledge property lines or the $200 you invested in that patio.
They travel beneath all of it. Removing established ribbon grass means digging at least 12 inches down and recovering every last root fragment. I spent an entire weekend excavating it. This is what Primal life is built around. What plants actually do in a real yard 3 years after you bring them home. Subscribe now. Zones 4 through 9, and the warmer your climate, the more aggressively it moves. What I grow in its place? Carl Forster feather reed grass. A tight, well-behaved clump with that same height and graceful movement. It stays exactly where you plant it. No rhizomes. Plant number 4, obedient plant. The name is ironic because this plant is anything but. Obedient plant sends up beautiful, tall spikes of pink or white flowers in late summer. Hummingbirds are drawn to it. Butterflies visit without stopping. The garden center tag called it a well-behaved native perennial, perfectly suited for sunny borders. I planted 3 along my garden path. First season, genuinely gorgeous. Year 2, 6 plants where 3 had been. Curious, but I was not concerned. Year 3, obedient plant had spread 4 feet in every direction. It was crowding out my coneflowers, tangled through my salvia. It spreads through aggressive underground stolons that travel quickly and snap apart easily, and every broken piece becomes a new plant. You have to dig deep, recover every fragment. Native does not mean gentle or contained. It means the plant evolved specifically to thrive in your regional climate, which often means it is exceptionally skilled at reproducing and expanding. What I grow in its place, Penstemon Husker Red, tubular flowers that hummingbirds visit just as eagerly. Beautiful, deep burgundy foliage stays precisely where you put it. Hardy across zones 3 through 8. Plant number 5, periwinkle, Vinca minor. Periwinkle is sold as the definitive solution for shady slopes. Dense, evergreen coverage, pretty purple-blue flowers in spring. Sounds like exactly what you need. I planted it on a slope behind my shed where grass had refused to grow and erosion was becoming a genuine concern. For the first year, it did exactly what I needed. It blanketed the slope, stopped the erosion, looked tidy and attractive. Then, it kept going. Periwinkle does not recognize the bottom of a slope as a boundary. It continued into the lawn, into adjacent beds, anywhere it could set a root. Once established, it creates such a dense mat that everything beneath is smothered. Native wildflowers I had been cultivating at the edge of that slope disappeared entirely. Small shrubs I had planted nearby were swallowed whole. Periwinkle does not share space. It takes over. I lost close to $400 worth of established plants to a ground cover I had paid $30 for. Removal means pulling up the entire mat by hand, and the roots are tough and relentlessly woven together. It is exhausting work that consumes hours even over a small area. Zones 4 through 9. What I grow instead: wild ginger, Asarum canadense. A native ground cover built for shade, stays within its boundaries, produces quietly beautiful little flowers at ground level, and actually supports the local ecosystem rather than suffocating it. Works in zones 4 through 8, and I have never once needed to remove it from anywhere I did not want it. Plant number 6, Lily of the Valley. This one stings a little because Lily of the Valley is genuinely beautiful. Those delicate white bell-shaped flowers, that soft, sweet fragrance, poetry and bridal bouquets. In your garden, however, it is a slow-motion takeover. I planted a small patch in a shady corner beneath a tree. For 2 years, it stayed compact and graceful. Then, in year 3, I began noticing it spreading. By year 5, it had traveled 6 feet from where I had originally put it and was pushing up through the roots of a hosta planted 3 feet away. Lily of the Valley spreads through underground rhizomes called pips. Those pips form dense mats just beneath the soil surface, and they are extraordinarily difficult to eradicate completely. Every tiny piece left behind becomes a new plant. The other issue: every part of this plant is toxic. Now, I want to ask you something directly. Do you believe garden centers carry a responsibility to warn customers about plants that spread aggressively or carry toxicity risks? Or do you feel that the research burden rests entirely with the gardener? Leave your honest opinion in the comments, because I know this question brings out strong feelings on both sides. What I grow instead: foam flower, Tiarella cordifolia, a beautiful native shade plant with delicate white flower spikes, attractive foliage, a well-behaved clumping habit, and absolutely no toxicity concerns. Works in zones 3 through 8. Plant number 7, chameleon plant. This is the one I regret more deeply than anything else. Chameleon plant has genuinely stunning foliage, green, pink, and red, all on the same leaf, tropical and exotic. The garden center label described it as ideal for moist shade and said it would spread to fill in problem areas. It spread all right. Within 1 season, it had filled the area completely. Within 2, it moved into the lawn. Chameleon plant ranks among the most invasive ornamental plants you can introduce to a garden. It spreads through rhizomes that push outward underground in every direction. It simply goes. It even releases an unpleasant smell. Removal means excavating every piece of root. If you till the area, you chop those rhizomes into hundreds of fragments, and each fragment becomes a new plant. Professional landscapers refuse to take on these jobs. What I grow in that spot now? Nothing. But if I had to put something in moist shade today, I would choose native golden star. Bright yellow flowers, a manageable habit, and support for native bees. Zones 5 through 9. Stay with me now, because what comes next is not just a plant I regret, it is the one that genuinely frightened me. Plant number 8, rue, Ruta gravulans. One of them came close to seriously hurting someone I love. Rue is sold as a medicinal herb with striking blue-green foliage. It carries a long history in traditional European gardens. It looks refined, considered, and historically grounded. I wanted that authentic cottage atmosphere. Year 1, it was exactly what I had envisioned. Year 2, it had self-seeded. Then one afternoon in late June, my grandson, 4 years old, was playing near that bed. He brushed against the rue plant while chasing a butterfly. Within 2 hours, blisters had formed on his arm. Rue contains chemical compounds called furanocoumarins. When those make contact with skin, and that skin is exposed to sunlight, it is a chemical burn, a phytophotodermatitis reaction that produces severe blistering, intense pain, and permanent scarring. Children are commonly affected because they move freely through gardens. It could have been his face. It could have been so much worse. I removed every rue plant from my property that same week. I have never planted it again. I am telling you this so that you never have to explain why a child came home from your yard with blisters on his skin. Subscribe. What I grow in its place: lavender, lavandula, beautiful blue-green foliage, deeply fragrant, beloved by pollinators, and completely safe for everyone in your yard. If you want that soft, silvery blue cottage garden feeling, lavender delivers it without a single safety concern. Zones 5 through 9. That is plant number 8, the most beautiful regret I ever made. 8 plants, 8 honest stories, and underneath every single one of them, the same pattern. I walked into a garden center, saw something beautiful, and brought it home. So before anything goes into your ground this season, ask yourself 3 things. First, what am I actually hiring this plant to do? And what else might it do that the label is not showing me? The tag shows you year 1, not year 3. Before you buy, search the plant name alongside the word invasive and read what real gardeners are saying. Second, what would it actually cost me to remove this if things go wrong? This is the question almost no one asks. Third, is this plant safe for the people and animals who actually use your yard? Research it independently every time. I make these videos because I wish someone had put this information in front of me before I made those mistakes. If that lands with you, subscribe to Primal Life right now, because every week I am making sure you do not have to learn any of this the hard way. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me which mistake this video saved you from.